A grand mansion, a baby on the way, and a love story that seemed torn from a fairy tale. Millionaire Julian Croft was ready to give his pregnant wife Elena the baby shower of the century. The invitations were sent, the caterers were booked, and the custom-made decorations filled their lavish home. But just 4 days before the party, Elena vanished without a trace. While a frantic search began, Julian made a chilling decision: the party must go on. He would stand among the pastel balloons and smiling guests celebrating a baby whose mother was missing, until the deafening sound of police sirens brought the charade to a crashing halt. The late afternoon sun of early October cast a golden, almost syrupy light over the manicured lawns of the Croft estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. The house wasn't just a house. It was a statement. A sprawling neo-Georgian mansion of pale stone and dark slate, it sat on 20 acres of pristine land that rolled down to a private sliver of the Long Island Sound. From the water it looked like a fortress of old money, but inside it was a gilded cage, and its most precious occupant, Elena Croft, was beginning to feel the bars press in. At 34, Elena was what the society magazines called effortlessly beautiful. Tall and slender with a cascade of dark chestnut hair, her face was a perfect oval dominated by large expressive brown eyes. Even now, 8 months pregnant, she moved with a dancer's grace, though her steps were slower, more deliberate. The baby, a boy they had already named Leo, was a constant active presence, a rolling, kicking reminder of the new life about to begin. A life Julian had meticulously planned down to the last detail. Julian Croft, at 42, was the architect of this perfect world. He hadn't been born to this wealth. He'd forged it himself in the brutal furnaces of Wall Street. He was a man of intense, almost predatory focus, with sharp blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing, and a smile that could be either a weapon or a reward. He'd built his private equity firm, Croft Capital, from the ground up, and he managed his life with the same ruthless efficiency. He'd seen Elena across a crowded charity gala 2 years ago, and had pursued her with the single-minded determination he applied to a corporate takeover. For Julian, Elena was his greatest acquisition. The baby shower scheduled for Saturday was to be the crown jewel of their social season. It was Julian's production, not Elena's. She had wanted something small, intimate, her sister, a few close friends, maybe a quiet lunch at their favorite restaurant in the city. Absolutely not, Julian had declared, pacing the length of their cavernous living room, a space so large it could swallow her quiet desires whole. This is our son, Elena, Leo. He deserves to be welcomed into the world. People need to see how much we love him, how much we love us. And so the guest list had swelled to 200. The theme was a whimsical "A Star is Born," with a constellation of tiny twinkling lights to be strung from the ancient oaks in the garden. A Michelin-starred chef from Manhattan was designing a bespoke menu. The favors were custom-engraved silver rattles from Tiffany & Co. It wasn't a baby shower. It was a declaration of status, a spectacle of success, and it was making Elena's skin crawl. On this Tuesday, just 4 days before the event, the house was a hive of frantic activity. Florists were conferring in the foyer, their arms full of baby's breath and white roses. Event planners with iPads and headsets moved like generals deploying troops. Elena stood in the nursery, a room Julian had commissioned from a famed interior designer. The walls were a soft, dreamy blue with a hand-painted mural of a celestial sky. A crib of polished birch stood in the center, a silent waiting throne. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. She ran a hand over the smooth, cool wood of the crib, her knuckles white. A wave of anxiety, sharp and cold, washed over her. It had become a familiar feeling these last few weeks, a tightening in her chest that had nothing to do with the baby's position. She felt like a performer in a play she hadn't auditioned for. The loving wife, the glowing mother-to-be, the flawless hostess. Her phone buzzed in the pocket of her cashmere maternity dress. It was her younger sister, Maria. "Hey, you." Maria's voice was a welcome anchor of normalcy. "Just checking in. Are you surviving Operation Over the Top?" Elena let out a shaky laugh. "Barely. Julian is in his element. I think he's enjoying this more than our wedding. He's a producer, Lenny, and you're his leading lady. Just try to enjoy the ride." "I'm trying," Elena whispered, looking at the perfect empty crib. "But I I don't know. Worried. Worried about what the baby. You're healthy. The doctors are happy." "No, not the baby." Elena hesitated. How could she explain the nebulous dread that clung to her? The feeling of being watched not by a stalker, but by her own life. The sense that Julian's love, once a comforting blanket, had become a velvet straitjacket. "It's just everything. This house. The party. It's all so much." "It's not me. It's Julian," Maria said softly. "He loves you, Lenny. He just shows it in his own grand, slightly insane way. He wants to give you the world." "But I don't want the world," Elena thought. "I just want a quiet corner of it." That evening, Julian came home late, smelling of expensive cologne and the city's electric energy. He found her in the library, curled on a leather armchair, a book lying unread in her lap. "Look at my beautiful Madonna," he said, his voice booming slightly in the quiet room. He crossed to her and kissed the top of her head, his hand resting possessively on her swollen belly. "Leo's been kicking." "He's a little soccer player," she said, forcing a smile. "Good. He's a Croft." Julian's smile was triumphant. He looked around the room at the whir of preparations just beyond the door. "It's all coming together, isn't it? It's going to be magnificent. The New York Times is sending a photographer for their society pages." Elena's stomach clenched. "Julian, do we have to? All those people, all those cameras." His smile tightened. "We've been over this, darling. This is a celebration, a public one. It shows strength, stability. It's good for business, and it's good for us." He knelt before her, taking her hands in his. His grip was firm. "Is something wrong, Elena? You seem distant." His blue eyes searched hers, and for a terrifying second she felt an urge to tell him everything. To confess that she felt suffocated, that she had been having quiet conversations with a lawyer, that she had a small bag packed and hidden in the back of her closet, filled not with designer clothes, but with cash, a burner phone, and a bus schedule. But the moment passed. The fear of his reaction, of his cool, controlled anger, was greater than the urge to be free. "No, I'm just tired," she lied, the word tasting like ash. "It's the third trimester. You know." He accepted the explanation, his face softening. "Of course. You need your rest. Big day on Saturday." He stood up, his mind already moving on to the next item on his checklist. "I'll be in my study. I have a few calls with Hong Kong." She watched him walk away, his back straight and confident. He was a man who never doubted, who never faltered. He built worlds, and he expected others to live in them happily. That night, Elena slept fitfully, plagued by dreams of running through endless gilded corridors, the sound of her own heartbeat echoing like a drum. The next morning, Wednesday, she was gone. The discovery was mundane, almost anticlimactic. Her bed was empty, the sheets cool. Her car, a silver Mercedes coupe, was still in the garage. Her purse, wallet, and primary cell phone were on the dresser in their bedroom. But Elena was not in the house. The staff hadn't seen her. The security guard at the main gate, a man named Frank, swore on his job that her car had not passed through. Julian, returning from his pre-dawn workout in the home gym, felt the first prickle of annoyance, not yet alarm. She was probably in the garden, he thought, or the solarium. But an hour later, after a full search of the house and the immediate grounds, annoyance had curdled into a cold, hard knot of fear in his stomach. He stood in their bedroom, the silence pressing in. He looked at her purse. He opened it. Her credit cards, her driver's license, everything was there. It was as if she had simply evaporated. His hand shaking, he picked up his own phone and dialed 911. As he spoke to the dispatcher, his voice calm and measured despite the frantic hammering in his chest, His eyes fell on a single out-of-place object on the floor by her side of the bed. It was a small silver rattle. The Tiffany's rattle. One of the 200 baby shower favors. It lay there gleaming innocently on the plush Aubusson rug, a silent, mocking testament to a party that might never happen. The arrival of the Greenwich Police Department shattered the estate's bubble of serene opulence. 2 patrol cars crunched up the gravel driveway, followed by an unmarked sedan carrying Detective Michael Harding. Harding was a man who seemed entirely out of place in Julian Croft's world. He was in his late 50s with a rumpled suit that had seen better days and a face etched with the cynicism of a 30-year career. He had a slow, deliberate way of moving that belied a sharp, analytical mind. He'd seen enough of the town's dark underbelly to know that wealth was often a veneer for the ugliest of human behaviors. He found Julian Croft in the library, standing before a cold fireplace, staring into its black maw as if searching for an answer. Julian had changed from his workout clothes into a crisp dress shirt and tailored trousers. His hair was perfectly coiffed. To Harding, he looked less like a distraught husband and more like a CEO chairing a crisis meeting. "Mr. Croft." "I'm Detective Harding," he said, his voice a low gravel. "Tell me exactly what happened." Julian recounted the morning's events in a clear, concise narrative. The discovery of the empty bed, the search of the house, the neatly left behind purse and phone. His control was absolute, his voice betraying only a flicker of strain when he mentioned Elena's advanced pregnancy. No signs of forced entry. Harding asked, his eyes scanning the room, taking in the leather-bound books, the expensive art, the sheer scale of the wealth. None. Our security system is state-of-the-art. Nothing was triggered. The gate logs show no unauthorized entries or exits. "Frank, my head of security has already confirmed." Julian's tone was clipped, as if frustrated by the inefficiency of the situation. "So she didn't drive out," Harding stated more than asked. "Her car is here, her wallet, her phone." "Did she have another phone, Mr. Croft?" "A prepaid one, perhaps." Julian's head snapped up. His eyes, for the first time, showed a crack in their icy composure. A prepaid phone. Why would she need one of those? Harding just shrugged, letting the question hang in the air. "Did you two have an argument? Any tension recently? Be honest with me, sir. It helps." "No," Julian said a little too quickly. We are perfectly happy. We're about to have our first child. We were planning the baby shower." He gestured vaguely towards the door at the chaos of the aborted party preparations. Harding walked over to the large bay window overlooking the back lawn. The pristine grass rolled down towards the slate-gray waters of the Sound. She liked to walk sometimes. In the gardens. But she's 8 months pregnant, Detective. She wouldn't have gone far. Not without her phone. The initial search was methodical and fruitless. Uniformed officers fanned out across the 20-acre property, their dark blue forms stark against the lush green. They searched the manicured gardens, the pool house, the tennis courts, the boathouse by the water's edge. A marine unit was called to do a cursory search of the shoreline. Every closet in the mansion was opened, every room inspected. It was as if Elena Croft had dissolved into thin air. Later that afternoon, Elena's sister Maria arrived. She burst into the house like a storm, her face pale and streaked with tears, her fury a raw, palpable thing. She found Julian and Harding in the main foyer. "Julian. What happened? Where is she?" Maria's voice echoed in the cavernous space. "We don't know." "Maria." Julian said, his voice softening, attempting to placate her. But Maria wasn't having it. Her eyes, so like her sister's, were blazing. She rounded on him. "What did you do? Did you have a fight? You and your temper." "That's enough." Julian snapped his own temper, flaring for a moment before he visibly reined it in. "This isn't helping." Detective Harding stepped between them. "Ma'am, I'm Detective Harding. Can I ask you a few questions?" He guided the still fuming Maria into the living room, leaving Julian standing alone in the foyer, his fists clenched at his sides. "When was the last time you spoke to your sister?" Harding asked gently. "Yesterday afternoon," Maria sniffled, sinking into a silk armchair that cost more than her car. "She called me. She was unhappy, detective. Scared." Harding's pen paused over his notepad. "Scared of what?" "Of this." Maria gestured wildly at the grand room at the whole opulent house. This life. It was suffocating her. She said she felt trapped. She wasn't excited about this circus of a baby shower. She said it was all for Julian, for his ego, for his image. Did she mention leaving him? Maria hesitated, chewing on her lower lip. Not in so many words. But she had been talking about it. About what life could be like somewhere else. Somewhere smaller, quieter. I told her it was just the hormones, the stress of the baby. I told her Julian loved her. She looked at Harding, her eyes pleading. "He does love her, doesn't he?" "He says he does," Harding said noncommittally. "Did Elena have any secrets, Maria? Anyone she was seeing? Anywhere she might go to get away?" "No, she loved Julian. She was just overwhelmed. And she would never, ever leave without telling me. And she would never risk the baby." The conviction in her voice was absolute. The first 48 hours crawled by. The Greenwich police set up a mobile command post at the end of the long driveway. The media, catching the scent of a scandal involving a millionaire and a missing pregnant wife, began to gather like vultures. News vans with satellite dishes sprouting from their roofs lined the quiet country road. Julian remained holed up in the house, a prisoner in his own fortress. He made calls to his head of security, demanding they review the CCTV footage from the past week frame by frame. To his powerful lawyer, a man named Arthur Vance, who advised him to say nothing more to the police without him present. To the event planner, a woman named Genevieve, who called to ask in a hushed, horrified tone what she should do about the caterers, the florists, the 200 Tiffany rattles. It was during that call that Julian made the decision. "The party is not canceled," he said, his voice a cold, hard stone. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Julian, I don't understand. Elena would want us to be hopeful," he cut in the words, sounding rehearsed like a press release. "This party is a celebration of our son. It is a symbol of our faith that she is coming home. We are not canceling. We will proceed as planned." "Understand?" "Yes, Julian," Genevieve whispered, shaken. When Detective Harding heard the news from one of his officers, who had overheard a staff member's phone call, he felt a chill. He had seen denial. He had seen grief. He had seen men crumble under the weight of a missing loved one. He had never seen this. This cold, defiant, almost theatrical insistence on normalcy. It was unnatural. On Thursday evening, Harding brought Julian back into the library for another conversation. Julian's lawyer, Arthur Vance, was present this time, a sleek, silver-haired shark in a Savile Row suit. "Mr. Croft, I have to be honest with you," Harding began, foregoing any pleasantries. "Your wife has been missing for over 48 hours. She is a high-risk missing person. And you're proceeding with a baby shower." "It's an act of faith," Detective Julian said smoothly, looking at his lawyer. Vance gave a slight nod. "Some might see it differently," Sir Harding pressed. "They might see it as callous. As if you're not concerned." "I am beyond concerned," Julian retorted, his voice rising. "I am living a nightmare. But I will not give in to despair. I am going to stand there in front of my friends and family, and I am going to tell them that I believe my wife is coming home to me and our son." It was a good performance. Polished, convincing. But Harding had been a detective for too long to be swayed by good performances. He watched Julian's eyes. They were clear and defiant, but underneath Harding saw something else. Not fear for his wife, but fear for himself. Later that night, one of the forensic techs who had been painstakingly going through Elena's belongings found something. Tucked inside a book on her bedside table, a collection of poetry by Pablo Neruda, was a receipt. It was from a pharmacy in Stamford, dated 2 weeks prior. The purchase was for a bottle of prenatal vitamins, standard enough. But below it was a second item, a pregnancy test. Harding stared at the receipt. Why would a woman who was 8 months pregnant, a woman whose nursery was fully assembled, buy a new pregnancy test? It made no sense, unless she had a reason to doubt what she had been told. Unless the perfect picture had a crack running right through its foundation. He picked up his phone and called a judge he knew. He was starting to think he needed to look a lot closer at Julian Croft's perfect life, and he had a feeling the place to start was with Elena's medical records. He had a hunch that the baby, the very reason for the lavish party, was at the heart of this whole mystery. Friday dawned gray and oppressive. A damp chill had rolled in off the Sound, seeping into the bones of the grand estate. For the public, the story of the missing millionaire's wife had become a national obsession. Cable news channels ran her picture on a loop, a smiling, radiant Elena at a charity event, her hand resting on Julian's arm. They dissected every known detail of the case, interviewing armchair psychologists who spoke of fugue states and secret lives, and former FBI profilers who hinted darkly at husbands with secrets to hide. The Croft mansion was now permanently besieged by media, their long-lensed cameras trained on the house like sniper rifles waiting for a glimpse of the grieving husband. Inside, however, the atmosphere was not one of grief, but of surreal, methodical preparation. Julian Croft was a man at war with uncertainty, and his weapon of choice was control. He had ordered the event planners to continue as if nothing was amiss. Trucks arrived not with police forensics teams, but with towering floral arrangements and cases of champagne. Staff scurried about polishing silver and laying out crisp white linens on dozens of tables arranged under a massive clear-span tent on the lawn. The juxtaposition was grotesque. A search for a missing woman was taking place just yards from where party favors were being set out. Elena's sister Maria was horrified. She had stayed at the house, refusing to leave, a silent, reproachful ghost haunting its gilded corridors. She confronted Julian in the dining room where he was tasting wine with the sommelier. "Are you insane?" she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "There are police dogs searching the woods where my sister might be lying hurt, and you are tasting Chardonnay." Julian dismissed the sommelier with a flick of his wrist. He turned to Maria, his face a mask of weary patience. "Maria, I understand this is difficult for you to comprehend, but this is not just a party, it's a message. To Elena, to whoever might have her. It's a message that we are not broken, that we are waiting, that her life is here ready for her to step back into it. That's delusional, Julian. Or worse, it's a performance. The police think so. Everyone thinks so. Let them think what they want," he said, his voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. "I know what I'm doing. I am fighting for my family in the only way I know how. I build things, Maria. I don't let them fall apart." His self-assurance was chillingly absolute. Maria looked at this man, her brother-in-law, and for the first time she felt a genuine sliver of fear. It wasn't just arrogance she saw, but a frightening detachment from reality, a refusal to engage with the horror of their situation on any normal human level. Detective Harding shared her assessment. He was building his own picture of Julian Croft, and it was far from the public image of the devoted husband. The preliminary background check had turned up whispers of a ruthless business reputation, of hostile takeovers that had left people ruined. More troubling were the sealed records of a messy breakup with a previous long-term girlfriend, a woman named Chloe Sanders, who had signed a very generous non-disclosure agreement. Then came the information from the pharmacy. The purchase of the pregnancy test was odd, but what Harding's team found next was a bombshell. Acting on a hunch, they had subpoenaed Elena's OB/GYN records. Dr. Anjali Sharma. Her doctor was initially reluctant to speak, citing patient confidentiality, but the warrant was undeniable. The records confirmed Elena's pregnancy, but they also revealed that at her very first appointment, Julian Croft had not been present. More significantly, they showed that Elena had insisted on a DNA test for the fetus as soon as it was viable. The results of that test were not in her file. Dr. Sharma, under questioning, admitted that the results had been sent directly to Elena's private email address just 3 weeks ago. An email address that was not the one Julian had access to. Harding felt a jolt of electricity. This was it. The crack in the foundation. The motive. He secured a second warrant this time for access to all of Julian Croft's financial records and electronic communications. While his team began the painstaking work of sifting through terabytes of data, Harding paid a visit to Julian's right-hand man, Marcus Thorne, the COO of Croft Capital. Marcus was everything Julian was. Not calm, unassuming, and visibly shaken by the events. He met Harding in a sterile conference room at their Midtown office. "I can't believe it," Marcus kept saying, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Elena is a sweetheart. And Julian, he adores her. This whole thing, the party, it's his way of coping. He's a fixer. If he can't fix this, he'll just pretend it's not broken until it is." "Was the business in any trouble?" Harding asked, steering the conversation. "No. We just closed the biggest deal in our history, a multi-billion-dollar acquisition. Julian was on top of the world. And his personal finances—" Marcus hesitated. "Julian is meticulous. He has a prenuptial agreement with Elena. It's standard for someone of his net worth." "How standard?" Harding pressed. "She gets a lump sum for every year of marriage. Substantial. But in the event of infidelity, on her part, she gets nothing." Marcus looked uncomfortable. It was his lawyer's idea. "Arthur Vance, he's very thorough. Infidelity." The word hung in the air. The secret DNA test. The prenup with a strict infidelity clause. A narrative was beginning to form, and it was an ugly one. Harding imagined the scene. Elena, suspecting something was wrong, confirms the baby isn't Julian's. She confronts him. Or perhaps she was planning to leave him, taking the child with her. For a man as obsessed with image and control as Julian Croft, the public humiliation would be catastrophic. It was a powerful motive for making a problem. Disappear. Back at the Croft estate, Julian was oblivious to the net tightening around him. He was in his study on a conference call, projecting an aura of calm authority when a young police officer knocked on the door. "Sir Detective Harding asked me to give you this." The officer handed him a Ziploc bag. Inside was a single object, a small, cheap, prepaid burner phone. "We found it in the back of your wife's closet, hidden in a duffel bag," the officer said, his expression neutral. "We're still working on getting the call logs." Julian stared at the phone. He felt a wave of nausea, a dizzying sense of vertigo. He had known about the hidden bag. In a fit of suspicion weeks ago, he had searched her closet while she was out. He had found the cash, the bus schedule, and this phone. At the time, he had dismissed it as a foolish romantic fantasy of escape, something a bored housewife might dream up. He'd even felt a pang of pity for her. He hadn't thought she would actually use it. He had believed his world was too strong, too perfect to ever truly leave. He looked from the phone back to the officer. His mind, usually so quick and decisive, was reeling. This changed everything. This meant she had a plan. This meant she was communicating with someone. He had to know who. The decision was instantaneous. The baby shower was no longer just an act of faith. It was a trap. Whoever Elena had been planning to run to, whoever her secret confidant was, they would be watching. They might even be on the guest list. He would stand in that tent, surrounded by his friends and enemies, and he would smoke them out. The show must go on now more than ever. It was no longer a party. It was a hunt. Saturday arrived with a sky the color of a fresh bruise. A cold, persistent drizzle fell, forcing the 200 guests to huddle under the vast, transparent tent on the Crofts' back lawn. The effect was strangely theatrical, as if the entire event were taking place inside a snow globe of misery. The whimsical "A Star is Born" theme now seemed macabre. The twinkling constellation of lights overhead felt less like a celebration and more like a memorial. The atmosphere was thick with a toxic cocktail of morbid curiosity and feigned sympathy. Women in designer dresses and men in expensive suits spoke in hushed tones, their eyes darting towards the main house, towards Julian. They sipped champagne and nibbled on canapes, all while dissecting the tragedy. Was he a grieving husband on the verge of a breakdown? Or was he a cold-blooded killer hiding in plain sight? Attending the party had become the ultimate moral dilemma of the Greenwich social set. And in the end, curiosity had won out over decorum. No one wanted to miss this. Julian Croft stood near the entrance to the tent, a rock in a churning sea of whispers. He was immaculately dressed in a navy blue suit, his face pale but composed. He greeted each guest with a firm handshake and a sad, practiced smile. He played the part of the brave, hopeful husband to perfection. "Thank you for coming," he would say, his voice low and steady. "Your support means the world to us. We're just praying she walks through that door any minute." His eyes, however, told a different story. They were not looking for Elena. They were scanning, searching, analyzing every face. He was a predator on the hunt. He watched for any flicker of guilt, any sign of shared secrecy. Was it that old college friend of Elena's who looked away too quickly, or the tennis pro from the country club whose handshake lingered a moment too long? His mind raced, constructing and discarding scenarios. Every guest was a potential suspect in the betrayal he was now certain had taken place. Maria was there, a dark specter in a simple black dress. She refused to participate in the charade, standing in a far corner of the tent, her arms crossed, her eyes burning holes in Julian's back. She was speaking quietly with Detective Harding, who had arrived uninvited and was now surveying the scene with his tired, cynical eyes. He wasn't a guest, he was a wolf circling a flock of very nervous sheep. About an hour into the grotesque affair, Julian stepped onto a small makeshift stage where a string quartet was playing a somber Vivaldi piece. The music faded. A hush fell over the crowd. Julian tapped the microphone, the sound echoing through the tent. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice thick with manufactured emotion. "I know this is unusual, but I needed to do this. For Leo, for Elena." He paused, letting the weight of the name settle. "I believe in my heart that my wife is safe and that she will be returned to us. This party, this is not a denial of the reality we face. It is a beacon. It is a light in the darkness, a message to her wherever she is that we are waiting, that her family is here, that her son is waiting to meet her." He raised his glass. "To Elena and to her safe return." The guests, caught in the grip of this bizarre psychodrama, murmured their assent and raised their glasses. It was a chilling, surreal moment. But as the champagne flutes were being lowered, a new sound cut through the drizzle and the quiet chatter. It started as a distant siren, then another and another, growing rapidly closer, a chorus of urgent wailing alarms. Heads turned. A wave of nervous energy rippled through the tent. The sound wasn't heading past the estate. It was heading for it. Then they saw it. Through the clear walls of the tent, a procession of official vehicles came sweeping up the long driveway. Not just one or two police cars, but half a dozen, along with a black forensics van and two unmarked sedans. They didn't stop at the command post. They drove right onto the manicured lawn, their tires tearing up the perfect grass, and screeched to a halt just feet from the party. Doors flew open and uniformed officers, their faces grim, began to spill out, creating a perimeter. The party guests froze, champagne glasses hovering midway to their lips. The string quartet fell silent, their bows suspended over their instruments. All the air seemed to have been sucked out of the tent. The final door to open was that of the lead sedan. Detective Harding, who had been standing with Maria, now walked purposefully towards the stage, moving through the stunned crowd. He was no longer a passive observer. He was in command. He held up a folded piece of paper. "Julian Croft." His voice boomed, amplified by the sudden dead silence. "I have a warrant to search these premises, and I have a warrant for your arrest on suspicion of the murder of your wife, Elena Croft." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Maria let out a strangled sob. her hands flying to her mouth. Julian stood on the stage, frozen, the microphone still in his hand. The mask of the grieving husband shattered, revealing a face of pure, unadulterated shock. This was not part of his plan. He had been the hunter, but the trap had just snapped shut on him. "This is insane," he stammered, his voice finally losing its carefully modulated control. "On what grounds?" "There's no body. You have no proof." "We have proof enough," Harding said, his voice cold as ice. "Our tech team just finished decrypting the data from your wife's hidden phone. The last number she called just hours before she disappeared wasn't a lover. It was a life insurance agent. She had just found out about the new policy you took out on her 3 months ago. A policy for $25 million. A policy that pays out even without a body after she's been declared missing for 1 year." Harding took a step closer to the stage, his eyes locking with Julian's. "You didn't proceed with this party as an act of faith, Mr. Croft. You did it to mark the beginning of the countdown." 2 uniformed officers mounted the stage, flanking a stunned and speechless Julian. The clicking of handcuffs echoed through the silent tent, a sound more final and damning than any gavel, as they led him away past the horrified faces of his guests, past the tables laden with untouched food and useless party favors. Julian's eyes found Maria's. In her gaze, he didn't see pity or triumph. He saw the cold, hard certainty of a truth he had refused to acknowledge. His perfect world had not just cracked. It had been built on a foundation of lies from the very beginning. The show was finally irrevocably over. The arrest of Julian Croft ignited a media firestorm of unprecedented scale. The image of the millionaire in handcuffs being led away from his own macabre baby shower was splashed across every news outlet in the country. The narrative, once a tragic mystery, had solidified into a simple, sordid tale. A greedy, controlling husband murdering his pregnant wife for a massive insurance payout. Julian Croft was no longer just a suspect. In the court of public opinion, he was already convicted. He was taken to the Greenwich Police Headquarters and placed in a stark, windowless interrogation room. The tailored suit now seemed absurdly out of place. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by a frantic, desperate energy. His high-powered lawyer, Arthur Vance, was by his side, but even the formidable attorney looked rattled. "This is a mistake, a catastrophic mistake," Julian repeated, his voice hoarse. "The life insurance policy was standard estate planning." "Arthur, tell them." "We advised Julian to secure his assets and plan for his family's future," Vance said to Harding, his tone smooth and practiced. "It's what any responsible man of his means would do." "It proves nothing." Detective Harding sat across from them, leaning back in his chair, unimpressed. He let the silence stretch out before he spoke. "What it proves, Mr. Croft, is that you had 25 million reasons to want your wife gone. You combine that with a prenup that would have left you financially exposed if she left you for another man, which you clearly suspected she was doing, and a picture starts to emerge. There was no other man," Julian insisted, slamming his hand on the metal table. "That's what I've been trying to figure out." "And the DNA test?" Harding asked quietly. Julian and his lawyer exchanged a look. "What DNA test?" Vance asked, his voice sharp. Harding smiled faintly. It was a predator's smile. "The one your wife ordered for the baby Julian. The one whose results were sent to her secret email account. An account our forensics team is currently opening up like a can of sardines." "You want to tell me what you think we're going to find in there?" Julian's face went white. The blood drained from it, leaving his skin looking like parchment. He had no idea Elena had taken a DNA test. The revelation hit him with the force of a physical blow. The hidden phone and the cash were one thing. This was a betrayal of an entirely different magnitude. This meant she hadn't just been planning to leave him, she had been gathering evidence against him. But for what? The infidelity clause in their prenup worked both ways. He slumped in his chair, the fight seeming to go out of him. "I didn't know," he whispered, more to himself than to the detective. She thought the baby wasn't mine." The idea was so preposterous, so inconceivable, it had never once entered his mind. He was Julian Croft. The idea that his wife would be unfaithful to him was a violation of the natural order of his world. While Julian was being formally charged, the police and media were tearing his life apart. The search of the house, now a full-blown crime scene, turned up more incriminating evidence. In the back of Julian's home office safe behind files for Croft Capital, they found a dossier. It was a private investigator's report on Elena dated from 6 months ago. It detailed her daily movements, her calls, her meetings. Julian had been spying on his own wife, but the most damning discovery came from the financials. While Croft Capital was indeed successful, Julian's personal finances were a house of cards. He had leveraged himself to the hilt, borrowing against his assets to fund a series of increasingly risky private investments, all of which had soured. He had been shuffling money between accounts, desperately trying to hide the truth. He was on the verge of personal bankruptcy. The $25 million insurance policy wasn't just estate planning, it was a lifeline he desperately needed. The public narrative of the fabulously wealthy Wall Street titan was just another part of the facade. The revelations kept coming, each one another nail in Julian's coffin. The former girlfriend, Chloe Sanders, broke her NDA, spurred on by a hunger for justice or fame or both. She went on national television and painted a portrait of Julian as a pathologically controlling and emotionally abusive partner, a man obsessed with image and capable of terrifying rage when his perfect world was threatened. In the midst of this media circus, a new critical piece of the puzzle emerged, not from the police, but from Maria. Racked with guilt and grief, she had been going through her sister's belongings that had been stored at her small apartment in the city. Tucked away in a box of old college yearbooks, she found a small leather-bound journal. With trembling hands, Maria opened it. It was Elena's. The entries were sporadic, written in her elegant looping script. The early pages were filled with hope and love for Julian. But as the months went on, the tone shifted. It became darker, more fearful. October 5th, one entry read, "Julian was furious today. I mentioned wanting to volunteer at the clinic again. He said it was beneath me, beneath Mrs. Julian Croft. He didn't shout. It was worse. His voice got quiet and cold. He said my only job now was to carry his son. I feel like an incubator in a designer dress." The last few entries were chilling. November 12th. I saw him again today, by accident, at the coffee shop. My heart nearly stopped. He looked right through me. Or maybe he just didn't recognize me. It's been so long. I had to run out. I was shaking so badly. Julian can never ever find out. November 15th. I have to know for sure. I can't live like this. I can't bring a child into this world with this lie hanging over us. I ordered the test. God help me. The final entry was dated the Monday before she disappeared. The results came. I was right. Oh God, I was right. It's not Julian's. It's his. How is this possible? What am I going to do? I have to get away. I have to disappear before Julian finds out. He would kill me. He would kill. I know he would. But first, I have to find him. I have to tell him the truth. Maria stared at the page, her blood running cold. His. The journal didn't say who he was. The pronoun hung there, a ghost in the narrative. Elena hadn't been running from a new lover. She'd been running towards someone from her past. Someone who was the true father of her baby. Someone she was terrified of, yet desperate to find. And the most terrifying part, the revelation that the baby wasn't Julian's, didn't exonerate Julian at all. In fact, it did the opposite. It handed him the one thing his defense was missing, a motive for Elena to run away. But it also provided him with an even stronger motive for murder than the insurance money. For a man like Julian Croft, the ultimate humiliation would not be losing his fortune, but the public revelation that his wife was carrying another man's child. His heir, his legacy, was a lie. Maria knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that she had to take the journal to the police. But she also knew that the identity of this mysterious him was the real key. Who was this man from Elena's past? And did he know he was about to become a father? The mystery of where Elena went had just been eclipsed by a much darker question. Who was she running to, and were they a savior or a monster? Elena's journal changed everything. While the district attorney was confident in their case against Julian, Detective Harding couldn't shake the loose end, the mysterious he from Elena's past. The narrative was no longer a simple case of a woman running from a murderous husband. It was infinitely more complex. She was running towards the secret father of her child, an unknown and potentially dangerous figure. The police forensics team redoubled their efforts, but the man was a ghost, leaving no trace in Elena's digital life. The breakthrough came from a painstaking review of the Croft estate security footage. Harding discovered an anomaly. For 6 weeks a car service had dropped off a passenger listed only as Miller at Elena's private art studio. The visit stopped abruptly 3 weeks ago, precisely when Elena would have received the secret DNA test results. The name was a dead end and the passenger had paid in cash. But he'd made one mistake. A grainy security camera image caught a partial profile of his face. Running it through facial recognition databases, they got a hit: Michael Novak. The name meant nothing until they pulled his file. Novak was Elena's high school boyfriend, the boy from the wrong side of the tracks. More importantly, an old tax record showed he'd worked for a private security firm, one that had been subcontracted to guard the Croft estate. The ghost had been hiding in plain sight. A raid on Novak's last known address in Bridgeport found the apartment empty. But on a table lay a map of bus routes to the Canadian border and a scattering of baby supplies. He wasn't just running, he was prepared for a newborn. The Amber Alert for Elena was immediately expanded to include her son Leo. The search for a body had become a frantic hunt for a living mother and child. In his jail cell, the news of the baby's true paternity shattered Julian Croft. His assets were frozen, his reputation destroyed, but all of that paled in comparison to this ultimate humiliation. His legacy was a lie. His lawyer tried to spin it as reasonable doubt, but Julian was beyond legal strategy. His mind was now fixed on a single obsessive goal: vengeance. Using his one phone call, he contacted his loyal COO, Marcus Thorne. The conversation was short, the instructions cold and clear: find Michael Novak. Use any resource, any amount of money. Julian Croft's private army was now in the field. A tense, two-pronged chase converged on the vast wilderness of northern New England. The official police search competed with Julian's shadow network of private investigators. The break came 3 days later from a gas station attendant in a sleepy Vermont town near the Canadian border. He reported a paranoid-looking man matching Novak's description, who bought gas and baby formula with a crumpled $100 bill. Both teams descended on the area. Monitoring police scanners, Julian's PIs got there first. They found Novak's beat-up station wagon abandoned on a remote logging road. Following a faint track into the woods, they found an old hunting cabin. After kicking in the door, they were met with a shocking tableau. Elena Croft was alive. She was huddled on a dirty mattress, thin and pale, clutching a tiny baby. Standing over them, his eyes wide with fear, was Michael Novak holding a small handgun. The barrel trembled as he aimed it at the intruders. In the tense silence, Elena looked up, her eyes locking with the lead investigators, and whispered a single heartbreaking word: help. The standoff at the Vermont hunting cabin ended quietly. With Elena and her baby safe, Michael Novak surrendered, a man defeated by his own fantasy. In the aftermath, the full tragic story was pieced together from the fractured confessions of the three people at its center. Novak, in a rambling confession, admitted his lifelong obsession with Elena. After discovering he was the father of her child, he saw a twisted path to reuniting with her. He manipulated a terrified Elena who was already planning her own escape by lying that Julian knew their secret and was closing in. He convinced her that he was her only savior, effectively kidnapping her and holding her in the remote cabin with a stream of lies. Elena, recovering in the hospital, confirmed Novak was once a friend, her only confidant in a lonely life. She had planned to run, but not to him. She had been manipulated, her fear used as a weapon against her. With Elena found alive, the murder charges against Julian Croft were dropped. He was a free man, but a broken one. His financial empire, exposed as a house of cards, collapsed entirely. He lost the company, the mansion, and the illusion of control he had cherished. In a final conversation with Detective Harding, he was left with only the hollow understanding that his obsession with building walls had only created a prison for himself. The aftermath was quiet and messy. Michael Novak was sentenced to a lengthy prison term for kidnapping. Elena divorced Julian, took her son, and moved across the country to start over, finally free from her gilded cage. Julian was left a shadow of his former self, a man who had everything and ended with nothing. There was no neat resolution, only the quiet ashes of lives consumed by obsession, control, and lies. The truth hadn't set anyone free. It had only revealed the shape of their cages. An obsession that turned into a kidnapping, a marriage that was a beautiful lie, and a millionaire who lost everything. The story of Julian and Elena Croft is a terrifying look at how secrets and control can shatter lives. It shows that the most dangerous prisons aren't made of steel bars, but of the deceptions we tell ourselves and the people we claim to love. What do you think? Was Julian a victim in the end, or did he create the conditions for his own downfall? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. 7 months pregnant. Emery Thorne was no longer the perfect accessory for her millionaire husband. Her crime, a 30-pound weight gain that came with nurturing his unborn child. His verdict, exile. As the cold wrought iron gates of their palatial New York estate slammed shut behind her, another woman was already stepping into her life, her shoes and her husband's private jet. This isn't just a story of unfathomable betrayal. It's the story of a woman left with nothing but the fierce protective love for her baby. A woman who decided that from the ashes of her perfect life, she wouldn't just rise, she would build an empire and take back everything. The air in the penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park was always chilled to a precise 68 degrees Fahrenheit, the way Damien Thorne liked it. It was an atmosphere that seemed to seep into the very bones of the place, a sterile perfection that mirrored its owner. From the outside, Damien and Emery Thorne were the city's golden couple. He, a self-made real estate magnate with a jawline as sharp as his business acumen and a portfolio that glittered with skyscrapers and luxury resorts. She, the beautiful, doe-eyed philanthropist whose grace and quiet elegance made her the perfect counterpart to his ambition. Their life was a meticulously curated series of events, galas at the Met Summers in the Hamptons, spontaneous shopping trips to Paris, and Christmases spent on the sun-drenched beaches of St. Bart's. They were regulars at restaurants like Per Se and Daniel, where their table was always waiting. Their world was one of bespoke suits, Hermes Birkin bags that Emery collected with the disinterest of a child collecting stamps and the constant subtle hum of the engine of their Rolls-Royce Phantom as it navigated the city streets. Damien didn't just like beautiful things. He demanded them. He saw his life as a brand, and every element within it, including his wife, had to be flawless. Emery had met Damien when she was a budding art historian consulting for a gallery he had acquired. He was captivated by her knowledge, her quiet confidence, and of course her willowy, Audrey Hepburn-like frame. He pursued her with the same single-minded intensity he applied to his business deals. He showered her with gifts, whisked her away on his jet, a sleek Gulfstream G650ER he'd christened the Titan, and made her believe she was the center of his universe. She fell in love not with the wealth, but with the man she thought he was decisive, protective, and brilliant. They married in a lavish ceremony at the Oaxaca Castle on Long Island, a fairy tale event that was the talk of the society pages for months. For the first 3 years the fairy tale held, Emery learned to navigate his moods, his obsession with control, and his almost pathological need for order. She organized their homes, the penthouse, the Hamptons estate, the Aspen chalet with military precision. She hosted flawless dinner parties, charmed his business partners, and never ever had a hair out of place. She was in every sense Mrs. Damien Thorne, a perfect reflection of his success. The first hint of a crack in their gilded cage came with the 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. Emery was overjoyed. She had longed for a child, for a warmth to fill the sometimes lonely spaces of their cavernous homes. When she told Damien, he was initially ecstatic. A son and heir to the Thorne Empire was the one acquisition he hadn't yet made. A boy, of course, he'd declared, pouring 2 glasses of vintage Dom Perignon, pushing one towards her before retracting it. "Oh, right. Not for you. We'll get you some sparkling cider. We'll have to plan the nursery. I want the best. Italian furniture, hand-painted murals. Nothing is too good for my son." The joy, however, was short-lived. It began to curdle as Emery's body began to change. The first trimester was a blur of morning sickness that left her pale and exhausted. Damien's patience wore thin. "Are you still sick?" he'd ask, his tone laced with annoyance as he fastened the cuff of his Richard Mille watch. "You need to get a handle on this, Emery. We have the Anderson charity benefit on Friday. You can't be seen looking so green." She tried. She forced down crackers, sipped ginger ale, and plastered a smile on her face for the cameras. But as she moved into her second trimester, the sickness subsided, and a new problem emerged: her appetite. For the first time in her life, Emery was truly hungry. The carefully controlled diet of salads and grilled fish that had maintained her size 0 figure was no longer enough. She craved pasta, bread, fruit, the very things Damien had always referred to as filler. And with the cravings came the weight. A gentle rounding of her belly at first, which Damien found novel. He'd place a proprietary hand on it at parties, a proud patriarch in waiting. But then her hips began to widen, her face lost its sharp angular quality, and her breasts swelled. The comments started subtly. "Are you sure you need a second helping of that, darling? Think of the baby," he'd say, a charming smile playing on his lips that didn't reach his cold, assessing eyes. "Those trousers seem a bit snug. Perhaps we should have your stylist bring over some more accommodating pieces. Maternity wear. But something chic, of course." Emery tried to brush it off. Pregnancy was a natural process. Women gained weight. It was for their child, their son. But Damien's remarks grew more frequent, more pointed. He would watch her eat, his gaze critical, making her feel gluttonous and ashamed for nourishing his own child. One evening, as she was getting ready for a dinner at Jean-Georges, she stood before the full-length mirror in their dressing room. She was 5 months pregnant now, and a soft, undeniable bump pushed against the silk of her custom-made gown. She felt a surge of love for the life inside her, a fluttering kick that made her gasp with a quiet joy. Damien walked in, adjusting his bow tie. He stopped and stared at her reflection. His face, usually a mask of cool control, twisted into a look of genuine distaste. "My God, Emery," he said, the words sharp as shards of glass. "Look at you. You're letting yourself go completely." The joy she'd felt moments before evaporated, replaced by a cold dread. "Damien, I'm pregnant. I'm supposed to gain weight. The doctor says I'm perfectly healthy." "I don't care what the doctor says," he snapped, walking over to her. He didn't touch her belly. Instead, he pinched the flesh at her waist. "This is just sloppy. I married a thoroughbred, not a broodmare. You have to maintain some standards." Tears pricked her eyes. "How can you say that? This is our baby. And you think our baby wants a mother who looks like this? You're an extension of me, Bella. When people look at you, they're looking at my judgment, my taste. And right now what I see is a lack of discipline." The words struck her with physical force. It wasn't about her health or the babies. It was about his image. She was a painting he had bought, and now in his eyes the canvas was warping. The next 2 months were a descent into a quiet, private hell. Damien put her on a strict diet monitored by their private chef. He scheduled mandatory sessions with a personal trainer who specialized in prenatal containment. He would weigh her not in the privacy of their bathroom but in the home gym, marking the number on a whiteboard as if she were a failing stock. Her weight gain slowed, but it didn't stop. She was growing a human being, and her body was doing what it was designed to do. But every pound was a new failure in Damien's eyes. He stopped touching her. The proprietary hand on her belly was gone. He slept on the far edge of their California king bed, a chasm of cold sheets between them. Their social life dwindled. He made excuses to attend events alone, claiming she needed her rest. In reality, Emery knew he was ashamed to be seen with her. The golden couple was tarnished. The isolation was suffocating. Their friends were his friends. Their world, his world. Who could she turn to? Admitting the truth that her billionaire husband was starving her, weighing her like livestock, felt insane. They would never believe it. They only saw the charming, successful Damien Thorne, the man who gifted hospitals and funded orphanages. They didn't see the tyrant who reigned within the pristine walls of their penthouse. She began to notice a new name appearing on his phone, a notification that would flash and be dismissed with a flick of his thumb: Amber. When she once casually asked who it was, he gave her a look that froze the question on her lips. "A business associate," he said curtly. "Don't pry." But Emery saw the late-night texts, the sly smiles he'd give his phone when he thought she wasn't looking. A quick search on Instagram revealed the truth. Amber Rayton was a model and influencer, all long limbs, surgically enhanced curves, and a permanently vacant pout. Her feed was a monument to narcissism: bikini shots in exotic locations, champagne glasses held in perfectly manicured hands, and captions filled with vapid pseudo-philosophy. She was everything Emery was not: brazen, artificial, and unapologetically transactional. And Emery noticed with a sinking heart, she was a size 00, the perfect unchanging accessory. Emery was now 7 months pregnant. She had gained 30 pounds, a number Damien recited with the same disgust he might use for a catastrophic business loss. The love she once felt for him had withered, replaced by fear and a growing, simmering resentment. She was no longer just fighting for her own dignity. She was fighting for the health of her unborn child. She started to sneak food, hiding granola bars in her closets and eating chocolate in the bathroom like a guilty teenager. The shame was immense, but the primal need to nourish her baby was stronger. The fairy tale was over. She was living in a beautiful, expensive cage with a keeper who was growing more monstrous by the day. She didn't know it yet, but the door to that cage was about to be flung open, not into freedom, but into a cold, unforgiving abyss. The breaking point arrived, as it so often does, under the glittering chandeliers of a public spectacle. It was the annual fundraising gala for the New York Children's Foundation, an event the Thornes had chaired for the past 2 years. This year, Damien had tried to get out of it. "You're in no condition to be seen, Emery," he'd stated, not asked, a week before the event. He was scrolling through stock reports on his tablet, not even bothering to look at her. She was sitting on the chaise lounge in their bedroom, her swollen ankles propped up on a pillow. "It's for the Children's Foundation, Damien," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I'm on the board. Not showing up would be a scandal. People will talk." "Let them talk," he scoffed. "Better they speculate than they see this." He made a vague, dismissive gesture in her direction. A spark of defiance, long dormant, ignited within her. "I'm going," she said, her voice firmer this time. "I have a dress. It's been tailored. I will look perfectly acceptable." Damien finally looked up from his tablet. His eyes narrowed into icy slits. "Fine," he hissed. "But if you embarrass me, Emery, I swear to you there will be consequences." The night of the gala, a palpable tension filled the penthouse. Emery had spent hours with her hair and makeup team, who worked miracles to give her a radiant glow, artfully contouring her face to minimize the pregnancy-induced roundness. The dress was a deep emerald velvet, custom designed by Oscar de la Renta's atelier to be both elegant and forgiving. It draped over her 7-month bump, a statement of regal motherhood rather than a concession to it. For a fleeting moment, looking in the mirror, she felt a flicker of her old self, a woman of grace and power. The flicker died the moment Damien saw her. He walked out of his dressing room, resplendent in a Tom Ford tuxedo, and stopped dead. He didn't say a word. He simply let his eyes travel over her, from her carefully coiffed hair down to the swell of her belly, and his lip curled in a silent sneer. It was more devastating than any insult he could have hurled. The ride to the Cipriani Ballroom on Wall Street was silent and cold. Emery stared out at the blurred city lights, her hand resting protectively on her stomach where her baby was kicking gently, oblivious to the storm brewing outside. They made their entrance to a flurry of camera flashes and fawning greetings. Damien slipped on his public mask with practiced ease. He smiled, shook hands, and placed a possessive arm around Emery's waist, pulling her close. To the outside world, they were the picture of a devoted, expectant couple. But Emery could feel the rigidity in his arm, the way his fingers dug into her side, a private signal of his displeasure. "Smile, darling," he whispered in her ear, his breath warm, but his words frigid. "You look like you're heading to a funeral." She forced her lips into a smile, her cheeks aching with the effort. They navigated the crowded room, a constellation of New York's elite. Women in couture gowns air-kissed her cheeks, their eyes darting to her stomach with a mixture of curiosity and pity. Emery had known these people for years, had sat on committees and planned charity auctions with them. Tonight she felt like a complete stranger, a specimen under a microscope. The first hour was a torturous performance. Emery managed to make small talk to discuss the Foundation's latest initiatives, to graciously accept congratulations on the baby. But she was acutely aware of Damien's constant surveillance. When she reached for a canapé, a single harmless-looking bacon-wrapped date, his hand shot out and clamped around her wrist. "Remember your discipline, Emery," he murmured, his voice dangerously low. He smiled at a passing acquaintance. "My wife has been so careful with her diet. For the baby, you know." Humiliation washed over her, hot and suffocating. She retracted her hand as if burned, her appetite vanishing completely. The true disaster began during the live auction. Damien, as the event chair, was on stage working the crowd with his signature brand of arrogant charm. Emery sat at their prime table near the front, flanked by a banking CEO and a shipping heiress. She felt a wave of dizziness, a consequence of her husband's enforced starvation diet, and reached for her water glass. Her phone sitting on the table buzzed. It was a notification from Instagram. Normally she would have ignored it, but a strange compulsion made her pick it up. A new post from a user she didn't follow had tagged her. Her blood ran cold when she saw the username, @AmberRaytonOfficial. With a trembling finger she opened the post. It was a story. A fleeting video that would disappear in 24 hours but felt as permanent as a scar. Amber Rayton, the model from Damien's phone, was pouting at the camera. She was in what was unmistakably the back of a luxury car, the bespoke cream leather and polished wood trim of the Thorne family Rolls-Royce. The video was shot from a low angle, showing off her cleavage in a tight, revealing dress. She didn't speak. She just winked, then panned the camera to the side. For a fraction of a second, the sleeve of a man's tuxedo came into view, a Tom Ford tuxedo identical to the one Damien was wearing on stage not 50 feet away. The caption was a single taunting word, "soon." And tagged in the post were two accounts, @Damien Thorne and @Emery Thorne. The air rushed out of Emery's lungs. This wasn't just an affair. This was a declaration of war. Amber hadn't just posted this for her followers. She had sent it directly to Emery, a digital poisoned arrow aimed straight at her heart in the middle of her husband's keynote event. The timing was malicious, designed for maximum impact, for maximum humiliation. It was a power play, a move to show Emery that she was being replaced, and the woman replacing her was already in her car, in her life. Emery felt the room tilt. The auctioneer's voice, Damien's voice, the chatter of the crowd, it all faded into a dull roar. The woman next to her, the shipping heiress, glanced over. "Emery, dear, are you all right? You've gone white as a sheet." Emery couldn't answer. She stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back with a clatter that drew a few stares. She had to get out. She had to breathe. Turning her back on the stage where her husband was auctioning off a week-long stay at their St. Bart's villa, she fled. She stumbled through the labyrinthine corridors of the historic building, her velvet gown feeling like a lead weight. She found a deserted side exit and pushed it open, stepping out into the cold, damp night air of a lower Manhattan alleyway. The stench of garbage and stale beer was a grotesque contrast to the perfumed air of the ballroom. She leaned against the cold brick wall, gasping for air, her heart hammering against her ribs. Betrayal was a physical thing, a crushing weight on her chest. It wasn't just the cheating. It was the audacity, the cruelty, the public nature of it all. This was a coordinated attack, and she knew with sickening certainty that Damien was a part of it. The tuxedo sleeve was no coincidence. Amber was his guest, hidden away somewhere waiting. Minutes later, the heavy door creaked open again. It was Damien. The charming mask was gone, replaced by a face contorted with pure fury. "What in the hell do you think you're doing?" he spat, advancing on her. "You walk out in the middle of my speech. You make a scene. Do you have any idea how that looks?" Emery held up her phone, her hand shaking so violently she could barely hold it steady. She showed him Amber's post. "This Damien. This is what I'm doing. Who is she? And why is she in our car tagging me on social media?" He glanced at the phone and his expression didn't shift. There was no surprise, no denial, only cold, hard annoyance. "Her name is Amber," he said, as if explaining a tedious business detail. "And you are overreacting." "Overreacting?" Emery's voice cracked, a mixture of disbelief and hysteria. "She is publicly humiliating me, humiliating us, and you're letting her—" "She's a part of my life now, Emery," he said, his voice dropping to a chillingly calm tone. "It's time you accepted that. Look at you." He gestured to her body with open contempt. "You've become a liability, an embarrassment. You're emotional, you're bloated, you're not the woman I married." Each word was a hammer blow. "I am carrying your child," she shrieked, the sound echoing in the narrow alley. "Don't you dare use that as an excuse," he roared, his composure finally breaking. "You think that gives you a free pass to turn into this cow? I gave you everything, Emery, a perfect life, and all you had to do was maintain your end of the bargain. You had to be beautiful. You couldn't even do that." The raw, unfiltered cruelty of his words finally broke through her shock and grief, replacing it with a white-hot rage. "The bargain?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fury. "Was that the bargain, Damien? To be your pretty, silent, anorexic doll? To be an object on your shelf that you could discard the moment it showed a single imperfection?" "Yes," he shouted, his face inches from hers. "That was the bargain, and you broke it." He turned to go back inside. "Clean yourself up and get back to the table. We will discuss your future later." But Emery didn't move. The spell was broken. The man she had loved, the life she had lived, it was all a lie. A beautifully constructed, soul-crushing lie. She stared at the closed door, the muffled sounds of applause filtering through. He had gone back to his adoring crowd, leaving her in the filth of the alley. She was no longer just in a cage. She was being cast out of it. And as the first drops of a cold rain began to fall, she knew the discussion about her future would not be a negotiation. It would be a sentencing. The drive home was a silent tableau of impending doom. Damien sat in the front with the driver, his back ramrod straight, refusing to even acknowledge her presence. Emery huddled in the expansive back seat of the Rolls-Royce, the same car Amber had been in just hours before, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. She felt contaminated, a trespasser in her own life. The plush leather seats seemed to mock her, a reminder of a world she no longer belonged to. When they arrived at their private elevator that led directly into the penthouse, Damien finally spoke. His voice was devoid of all emotion, flat and final. "Pack a bag," he said, not looking at her, as he strode towards the bar and poured himself a large scotch. Emery stood frozen in the marble-floored foyer. "What are you talking about, Damien?" He took a long swallow of his drink before turning to face her. His eyes were as dead as a winter sky. "I am talking about the end of this. The end of us. I want you out. Tonight." The words hung in the sterile air. Out. Just like that. Her mind struggled to process the finality of it. Out. Where am I supposed to go? I'm 7 months pregnant with your child. You can't just throw me out on the street. A humorless laugh escaped his lips. "Watch me. I can, and I will. You are no longer my wife, Emery. You are a problem I am solving. As for the child, He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. My lawyers will be in touch. I will of course provide for my son, but I will not have his mother be you, not like this. The sheer arrogance, the cold-blooded transactional nature of his decision was breathtaking. He was severing her from her life as cleanly as a surgeon excising a tumor. You can't do this, she whispered, tears finally streaming down her face, tracing paths through her expensive makeup. We have a life together. We have history. I love you. The last words came out as a desperate, pathetic plea, and she hated herself for it. No, he said, placing his glass down with a decisive click. You loved the life I gave you, and that life is over. You made your choice when you decided to let yourself fall apart. I'm making mine. He glanced at his watch. I have a car waiting downstairs in 30 minutes. Be in it, or my security will escort you out. He turned and walked into his study, closing the heavy oak doors behind him, the sound of the latch clicking into place like the door of a prison cell. Emery stood alone in the cavernous living room, surrounded by millions of dollars of art furniture and memories that now felt like props from a stranger's play. The shock was so profound it was almost paralyzing. 30 minutes. 30 minutes to dismantle a life, to pack away a future. She stumbled towards their bedroom, a magnificent suite with panoramic views of the park, the king-sized bed, the silk sheets, the walk-in closet the size of a small apartment. It was all part of the set. Her closet was a temple of couture, a rainbow of Chanel, Dior, and Valentino. Shoes she'd never worn, purses that cost more than a car. It was all meaningless. With numb fingers, she pulled out a single suitcase. What did one pack for an eviction? She grabbed a few simple, comfortable maternity dresses, a pair of flat shoes, her toiletries. She saw the emerald velvet gown from the gala crumpled on a chair, a sad, discarded symbol of her final humiliation. She left it there. Her eyes fell on the jewelry box on her vanity. Inside lay the breathtaking 10-carat diamond engagement ring Damien had placed on her finger, the sapphire necklace he'd given her for their first anniversary, the pearls, the emeralds. For a moment, a spiteful urge rose in her to sweep them all into her bag. They were worth a fortune. But the thought made her feel sick. They weren't gifts of love. They were investments, part of the price of owning her. She slammed the box shut. She would take nothing that tied her to him. Her hand went instead to a small, worn wooden box tucked away in a drawer. Inside was a handful of items that were truly hers. A locket with a picture of her parents, a faded postcard from her college study abroad trip to Florence, a small silver charm bracelet she'd had since she was a girl. These were the remnants of the woman she was before she became Mrs. Damien Thorne. She swept them into her handbag. As she zipped the suitcase, a wave of gut-wrenching sobs overtook her. She sank to the floor, her body shaking, her arms wrapped around her belly. It wasn't the loss of the wealth that broke her. It was the absolute annihilation of her reality. The man she had built a life with, the father of her child, had looked at her and seen nothing of value. He was discarding her as easily as he would a losing stock. A sharp knock on the bedroom door made her jump. It was one of Damien's security guards, a large, impassive man named Frank. "The car is ready, Mrs. Thorne," he said, his voice polite but firm. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "It's just Emery now, Frank," she said, her voice raw. She pulled herself to her feet, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Dignity. It was the only thing she had left. She walked out of the bedroom, pulling her small suitcase, and didn't look back. The living room was empty. Damien didn't even afford her the courtesy of a final goodbye. He remained hidden in his study, a coward hiding behind his wealth and his power. Frank escorted her to the service elevator, the one used by staff and for deliveries. The symbolism was not lost on her. She had entered this life through the front door, a bride on her husband's arm. She was leaving it through the back, like trash being taken out. The car waiting in the underground garage wasn't one of Damien's luxury vehicles. It was a standard black town car. The driver, another face she didn't recognize, opened the door for her without a word. As she slid in, her phone buzzed again. Another Instagram notification. She couldn't stop herself. She had to look. It was Amber Rayton again. This time it wasn't a story. It was a permanent post on her grid. The picture was a masterpiece of calculated cruelty. Amber, clad in a tiny bright yellow bikini, was lounging on the plush cream-colored leather seats of a private jet. Her body was tan-toned and impossibly slender. One hand was draped languidly over her flat stomach, while the other held a flute of champagne. Behind her, through the circular window, the city lights of Manhattan twinkled like a distant, forgotten world. Anyone who had ever seen a picture of Damien Thorne knew his jet. It was unmistakably the Titan. But it was the caption that delivered the final fatal blow. Up, up and away, spontaneous trip to St. Bart's to celebrate a new beginning. Out with the old, in with the new. Upgraded, #life. Is good, #no baggage. The hashtag #no baggage was a deliberate, vicious jab. It was a clear reference to Emery, to her emotional baggage, to the physical baggage of her pregnant body. Emery stared at the screen, a low guttural sound of pure anguish escaping her lips. The picture had been posted just minutes ago. While she was being thrown out into the street, her replacement was boarding her husband's jet, heading to their vacation home, toasting a future that was supposed to have been hers. Damien hadn't even waited for her to be gone. The betrayal was so swift, so complete, it was almost surreal. He hadn't just moved on. He had orchestrated a seamless, brutal transition, ensuring his life of perfection continued without so much as a moment's interruption. The car pulled out of the garage and into the rain-slicked streets of the city. Emery looked at her own reflection in the window. A pale, tear-streaked face, a woman with a single suitcase and a baby on the way, cast out into the night. Then she looked back down at the phone, at the image of the tan bikini-clad mistress in the private jet. The grief for a moment was a physical inferno threatening to consume her entirely. But then something else began to flicker in the embers. A tiny spark of something cold and hard and furious. He had called her a liability, an embarrassment, baggage. He had thrown her away. He had forgotten one crucial thing. This baggage he'd discarded had a heartbeat. Two, in fact. Her own and the strong, steady one of the child nestled inside her. And a mother's love she was beginning to realize could be the most dangerous force in the world. He had taken her life, but he had given her a reason to fight. And as the town car sped away into the darkness, leaving the glittering spire of her former home behind, Emery Thorne made a silent vow to her unborn child. They would be back, and they would not be asking for permission. They would be taking what was theirs. The war was not over. It had just begun. The first 24 hours were a free fall through a disorienting fog of despair and disbelief. The anonymous town car deposited Emery on the curb of a Harrison hotel in Midtown, a monument to beige functionality. The driver didn't help with her single suitcase. He simply popped the trunk and sped away, severing her final link to the world she once knew. The lobby was a sea of neutral tones, smelling faintly of industrial cleaner and the burnt coffee of weary travelers. It was clean, efficient, and utterly devoid of soul, a stark, brutal contrast to the bespoke floral arrangements and hushed elegance of her former home. Checking in felt like a surreal out-of-body experience. As the indifferent clerk tapped at his keyboard, Emery stared at her own reflection in the polished brass of the check-in counter. Her face was pale and puffy, her eyes raw from crying, her couture maternity dress now looking absurdly out of place. She gave her maiden name Emery Hayes, and the name felt foreign on her tongue, a ghost from a past life. She paid for a single night with the emergency visa she'd kept from her pre-Damien life, her fingers trembling as she slid it across the counter, praying it wouldn't be declined. The room was suffocatingly small. A queen bed with a stiff patterned duvet, a dark wood desk scarred with the rings of other people's glasses, and a single window that offered a dismal view of a soot-stained brick wall. The air was thick with a stale, recycled chill. This was it. This was the abyss. She sank onto the edge of the bed, the mattress groaning under her weight, and the sheer totality of her fall from grace crashed down on her. Just last night she had slept on fret linens in a penthouse that floated above the city lights. Tonight her world had shrunk to this sterile 10 by 12-foot box. She was an exile, a non-person. Mrs. Thorne, the society hostess, the patron of the arts, the woman whose opinion on table settings was once breathlessly quoted in magazines, had been summarily executed. In her place was a 7 months pregnant woman with one suitcase, a dwindling bank account, and a future as blank and grim as the brick wall outside her window. Driven by a masochistic compulsion, she opened her phone. The screen glowed a portal to the life that was no longer hers. Amber Rayton's Instagram account was a vibrant, sun-drenched spectacle of cruelty. Each new post was a meticulously crafted torment. There was Amber laughing on the deck of Damien's yacht, the Tempest, the turquoise waters of St. Bart's sparkling behind her. Emery's heart seized. She and Damien had spent their second anniversary on that very yacht. There was Amber raising a glass of rosé at a table at Eden Rock, the caption, a gushing tribute to the most romantic dinner ever. That was Emery's favorite table, the one with the perfect view of the sunset over the bay. Damien had always made sure they had it. Then came the photo that made her physically sick. Amber posing for a selfie in what was clearly the master suite of the St. Bart's villa. Draped around her tanned, slender neck was a delicate vintage diamond necklace from Van Cleef & Arpels. A third anniversary gift. Emery had agonized over leaving it behind, and now here it was adorning the throat of her replacement. Damien hadn't just given it to her. He must have had it flown out specifically for her, a deliberate desecration of their shared history. The comments section was a dizzying mix of fawning praise and hungry speculation. You are living the dream. Who is this mystery billionaire spoiling you? A few astute followers tagged Damien, but the comments were quickly deleted, scrubbed clean by some unseen digital janitor. Then Emery saw it, a comment from a burner account, a faceless profile with 0 posts. Looks like he traded in a Rolls-Royce for a rental. Enjoy it while it lasts, sweetheart. Trophies get dusty. The comment was a tiny pinprick of light in the suffocating darkness. Someone else saw it. Someone else knew. She screenshotted it just before it vanished, holding on to it like a talisman. Morning came, but with it no relief, only the cold, sharp edge of reality. Her phone buzzed, not with a call, but with a text. It was from an unknown number, clinical and devoid of any human warmth. Your personal credit cards and associated bank accounts have been frozen effective immediately pending divorce proceedings. A monthly stipend of $5,000 for living and prenatal expenses will be deposited into a new account. Details to follow via post. Do not attempt to contact Mr. Thorne directly. All future communication must be directed through our office. Latham & Watkins, LLP. The message was a second eviction, a financial one. She opened her banking app and saw a string of zeros where a fortune had been the day before. She tried to purchase a bottle of water from the minibar using her Amex Centurion card, the black card that was a symbol of her status, and the transaction was as expected declined. The humiliation was absolute. $5,000 a month. It was a calculated cruelty, a pittance designed not for her survival, but for her subjugation. It was a leash long enough to prevent her from starving on the street where she might cause a scene, but short enough to ensure she could never mount a meaningful defense. It was control, pure and simple. Her first call was to her parents in Connecticut. Her mother's cheerful, "Hello," shattered into horrified silence as Emery, her voice cracking, recounted the nightmare of the past 48 hours. The words tumbled out the gala, the alleyway, the Instagram posts, the cold final command to pack a bag. That monster, her father seethed in the background. "I'm coming to get you right now. You're coming home, Bella." The offer of her childhood bed, of her mother's gentle care, was a powerful siren song. But as she looked at her reflection in the dark hotel room window, Her hand resting on the firm swell of her belly, she knew she couldn't go back. To retreat to her parents' home would be to accept defeat, to regress into the role of the broken child. Her own child, this innocent life inside her, deserved a mother who was a fighter, not a refugee. "I can't, Dad," she said, her voice finding a sliver of strength. "I have to stay here, in New York. This is where it happened, and this is where I have to fix it." Her second call was to Chloe Devereaux. Chloe, a sharp-witted art dealer who had married into a notoriously stuffy old-money family, had always been an ally, a fellow traveler in the gilded cages of Manhattan's elite. "Bella, my God, where are you?" Chloe's voice was a welcome balm of genuine concern. "Damien put out a story that you were ordered on complete bed rest for the rest of the pregnancy. I knew it was bull. He looked like a cat that swallowed a canary at the gala after you left." This time Emery didn't cry. She laid out the facts with a cold, clear precision that surprised even herself. The affair, the public humiliation, the eviction, the financial leash. When she finished, the silence on the other end of the line was heavy and dangerous. "That pathologically narcissistic son of a bitch." Chloe finally spat the words laced with venom. "I never trusted him. He always looked at you like he was assessing his portfolio. Okay, new plan. Where are you?" Emery told her the name of the hotel. "Absolutely not. You are not staying in some godforsaken tourist trap where the bed probably has a 5-star rating on Bedbug Advisor. I'm sending my driver Stefan. He'll be there in 20 minutes. Pack your bag. And for the love of God, Emery, get off Instagram. Stop drinking the poison he's serving." An hour later, Emery was stepping out of a discreet black SUV and into a different world. Chloe hadn't taken her to her own sprawling Park Avenue apartment, but to a charming private garden apartment on a tree-lined street in the West Village. It was a world away from the cold modernism of the penthouse. It had warm hardwood floors, overflowing bookshelves, and a cozy fireplace. A small private garden at the back was filled with pots of herbs and late-blooming roses. It felt like a home, not a showroom. "It's an investment property," Chloe explained, pulling Emery into a fierce, protective hug. "It's yours, for as long as you need it. No rent, no questions. Consider it a grant from the Women Scorned by Vile Billionaires Emergency Fund." "Now," she said, leading Emery to a comfortable armchair. "First things first, we need a lawyer. Not one of the silk-stocking guys who plays golf with Damien's buddies. We need a shark. We need a woman who will fillet him and serve him for lunch." Chloe was a force of nature. By that afternoon, she had secured an appointment with Thea Pappas, a divorce attorney so legendary and so feared that her name was only ever spoken in hushed, reverent tones. Her nickname in the legal community was the Widowmaker, for her uncanny ability to leave powerful, arrogant men legally and financially bereft. The meeting was the next day. Emery, dressed in the most professional-looking maternity dress she owned, felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. Thea Pappas's office, in a sleek tower overlooking the Hudson, was the epitome of quiet, lethal power. No clutter, just clean lines, modern art, and a commanding view. Thea herself was in her late 50s with piercing blue eyes that missed nothing, a razor-sharp gray bob, and an aura of unshakable competence. She didn't offer fake sympathy. She offered Emery a glass of water and a comfortable chair. "Ms. Devereaux gave me the broad strokes," Thea began, her voice calm and measured. "But I need to hear it from you, from the beginning. Every detail, no matter how small or humiliating." Emery took a shaky breath. She started with the joy of her pregnancy, and then, her voice gaining a steely edge, she recounted the escalating cruelty, the weigh-ins, the dietary control, the constant criticism. She detailed the public humiliation at the gala, showing Thea the screenshots of Amber's taunting posts, the timestamp proof that her replacement was boarding the jet to St. Bart's while she was being thrown into the street. She finished with the lawyer's text, the financial guillotine. Thea listened without interruption. Her fingers steepled, her gaze intense. When Emery fell silent, the attorney leaned back in her high-backed leather chair. A slow, thin smile touched her lips. "He is breathtakingly arrogant," Thea said, a glint of battle in her eyes. And in my line of work, arrogance is a gift. It makes men sloppy. It makes them predictable. This is very good for us." "Good?" Emery asked, her voice a whisper. "He has everything. All the power, the best lawyers. He's left me with nothing." "He hasn't left you with nothing," Thea corrected her, leaning forward. Her voice was soft but held the resonance of steel. "He's left you with his child, his heir. In the state of New York, a judge will take a very dim view of a man who evicts his pregnant wife, and he's left you with a narrative. The beautiful, supportive wife cast aside during the most vulnerable time of her life for a cheap affair. The public humiliation, the meticulously timed Instagram posts. This isn't just a divorce, Mrs. Thorne. This is a story. And we are going to seize control of that story." For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a fragile tendril of hope unfurled in Emery's chest. "He wants to play dirty," Thea continued, her voice hardening. "He thinks he can use his power to silence you. We'll use his power against him. We file for divorce immediately. The grounds will be adultery and extreme mental cruelty. We subpoena everything, his and Ms. Rayton's phone records, text messages, emails, travel manifests for the Gulf Stream, credit card statements for the no-limit Amex he gave her. We will build an irrefutable timeline of this affair, proving it was a long-term calculated conspiracy to replace you. We will paint a picture of a monster so obsessed with his public image that he emotionally abused and starved his pregnant wife." Thea stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city. "He thinks he can buy your silence with $5,000 a month. He wants to drag this out, bleed you dry. We're going to make this divorce so public, so messy, and so financially catastrophic that his board of directors will get stomach ulcers. His shareholders will demand he settle. We are not aiming for a fair settlement, Emery. We are aiming for a punitive one. One that provides for you and your child for the rest of your lives and makes Damien Thorne think twice before he ever treats another human being like a disposable asset." The weeks that followed were a strange dichotomy. In the quiet sanctuary of the West Village apartment, Emery began the slow, arduous process of healing. Guided by Chloe's fierce friendship, she found a therapist who specialized in trauma and emotional abuse. She joined a prenatal yoga studio nearby, feeling a sense of community with the other expectant mothers, their bodies all changing in beautiful, unique ways. She rediscovered the simple, grounding pleasure of cooking for herself, visiting the local farmer's market, and finding joy in the vibrant colors of fresh produce, a world away from the bland, restrictive diet Damien had enforced. She was slowly, carefully rediscovering Emery Hayes. Simultaneously, the legal war raged. Damien's high-powered lawyers at Latham & Watkins were every bit as aggressive as Thea had predicted. They filed motion after motion, trying to bury her team in paperwork. Their first settlement offer was a joke, a lump sum that wouldn't even cover the cost of the art in her old living room, contingent on a draconian non-disclosure agreement that would have forbidden her from ever speaking about her marriage. Thea Papa sent it back with a single handwritten note: "You can't be serious." Then came discovery. Thea's team of forensic accountants and investigators were relentless, and they found gold. Text messages between Damien and Amber that were more damning than Emery could have imagined. Damien complaining about the bloated liability and her endless whining. Amber and Damien openly joking about the perfect timing of the gala incident, planning it like a marketing campaign. They found receipts for the Miami condo for lavish gifts for secret vacations that had stretched back over a year. It was all there. Proof. The pain of reading it was immense, but it was overshadowed by a profound, clarifying vindication. She wasn't crazy. It was all real. Armed with this evidence, Thea's team began to fight back, not just in the courtroom, but in the court of public opinion. Anonymous, carefully selected details were leaked to veteran gossip columnists. The narrative began to shift. The initial story of a billionaire trading up for a younger model was replaced by whispers of shocking cruelty. The phrase "abused his pregnant wife" began appearing in headlines. Amber Rayton, once the triumphant victor, found the comments on her Instagram feed turning from adoration to vitriol. Her carefully curated image was crumbling. Damien, accustomed to absolute control, was apoplectic. His clean, swift execution of his marriage had devolved into a bloody public war. His company's stock, once impervious, took a small but noticeable hit. The brand of Damien Thorne was becoming toxic. One cool autumn evening, as Emery was walking home from her yoga class, feeling a moment of genuine peace, she saw him. He was leaning against a black Mercedes parked just down the street from her apartment building, his face etched with a fury and exhaustion she had never seen before. Her breath caught, but the old fear was gone, replaced by a cold, steady calm. She continued walking, her hand resting on her belly. "Emery," he called out, his voice strained. "We need to talk." She didn't stop. "We have nothing to talk about, Damien. If you want to communicate, you can speak to my lawyer." He moved quickly, blocking her path and grabbing her arm. "This has gone too far. The leaks, the newspapers. You're trying to ruin me." She stopped and slowly looked down at his hand gripping her arm. Then she lifted her gaze to meet his. Her eyes were clear and direct. "You threw me out of our home while I was carrying your child," she said, her voice quiet but unwavering. "You allowed your mistress to publicly taunt and humiliate me. You cut me off financially and tried to erase me from my own life. Don't you dare talk to me about ruining people." His face fell, his arrogance momentarily punctured by the simple, unassailable truth of her words. She pulled her arm from his grasp with a finality that startled him. "You did this to yourself," she said, stepping around him. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go rest. It's what's best for your son." She walked into her building without looking back, leaving him standing alone on the darkening sidewalk. For the first time in his meticulously curated life, Damien Thorne looked utterly and completely defeated. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. He had started a fire, certain she would be consumed by the flames. He had never once imagined that she would emerge from them not burned but forged into something stronger than he could ever comprehend. Emery's journey from a discarded wife to a symbol of resilience captivated the city. Her story wasn't just about a marriage falling apart. It was a powerful testament to a woman's strength in the face of unimaginable cruelty and public humiliation. She transformed her pain into power, her despair into determination. While Damien's carefully constructed empire began to show deep, irreparable cracks under the weight of his own arrogance and the public scandal, Emery focused on building a new life, one of authenticity, strength, and most importantly, love for her soon-to-be-born child. Her fight was for more than just a settlement. It was for her identity, her future, and for the right to define her own worth beyond the shadow of a powerful man. What do you believe is the ultimate justice in a story like this? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If Emery's story of strength and transformation resonated with you, please give this video a like. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own inner power. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss the fallout and the final chapter of this incredible real-life drama.